Aloha, this is Samoa Guy in Hawaii with an explanation of why I feel anointment activation by fake grasp should come back. The big November 90 patch removed the ability for Amara and Flak to activate ASE anointments using fake grasp and fake burst, respectively. Now, the patch notes just say anointments, but that's what these mechanics were primarily used to activate ASE anointments. Now, the patch notes specifically referred to this change as part of the dev's goal of making sure that, quote, no Vault Hunter has an unfair advantage related to anointments activating, unquote. This was specifically about anointment activation, and that is all I'm here to address, specifically ASE anointments. Now, I submit that if the playing field was not necessarily level with respect to anointment activations before the patch, it's just as tilted now, okay, post-patch, just in a different way. Now, I actually think the entire topic of balance amongst Vault Hunters is extremely complex and cannot and should not be addressed by removing mechanics that have been in the game since launch. That's almost 14 months. A couple of things, though, before I explain my reasoning. Most of what I argue here, I submitted to 2K as feedback, and 2K graciously responded. They said they really liked what I had to say and asked me to submit any related feedback and ideas to them so they could pass it on to the devs at Gearbox in one big batch. I did that, they passed it on, and I really appreciate that. It also illustrates the old, you get more flies from honey adage, okay? Gearbox and 2K are great companies putting out awesome products and working their butts off to make them better. And Borderlands is a game. If we throw a tantrum and just yell at them, they won't necessarily react positively to said criticism, and I wouldn't blame them. If we, however, present our concerns in a respectful, well-reasoned manner, they will listen. Also, full disclosure, I am primarily an Amara main, and this change had a direct effect on a build I just put together less than 2 weeks ago. Now, the patch notes that the devs are, quote, are monitoring how these changes affect those characters and their builds and are looking to adjust as necessary in the future, unquote. So in addition to discussing the overall issue, I will also explain how it seriously handicaps one build in particular. Okay. So, the concept of fairness with regard to anoint activations is tricky. Every Vault Hunter is different, specifically when it comes to action skills. Variety is great, but it also makes comparisons complicated. Okay, ASE anointments, however, are all very similar in that they all confer some kind of benefit for a fixed amount of time or a normally short duration condition, i.e. next 2 magazines. Getting the most out of any ASE anointment means trying to proc them as often as possible, preferably by keeping the time between activations less than the duration of the anointment's effect. Short duration, short cooldown action skills work best. With this in mind, before the patch, maximizing use of ASE anointments heavily favored Flak, followed by Amara, with Zane and Mose bringing up the rear. Now, after the patch, Flak and Zane are now on par with each other, with Amara and Mose a distant second. Okay, the playing field has not been leveled, just tilted in a different direction. How so, you might ask? Okay, properly spec'd, Flak's rack attack can proc ASE anointments about once every 6 seconds, and that's before any action skill cooldown measures are implemented. Okay, Fake Burst benefited Flak's Gamma Burst skill, but only while not using it. The moment Flak deploys Gamma Burst for real, the 20-second duration means the benefits will expire before the burst does, and that does not include any cooldown. Flak can also use Fade Away, Head Count, and at least while mobbing, Eager to Impress to get ASE anointment activations below about 8 seconds. I have a build that does just that. Now, with Flak's new Gravity Snare, however, Flak has yet another way to proc ASE anointments every few seconds. Okay, Flak can deploy a snare, pick it right back up, procking the anoint, and then throw it down a few seconds later without even additional cooldown mechanics. Additionally, Flak can also toss the snare off a cliff or into any off-map void to proc ASE anointments. Okay, now while not as simple as Fake Grass or Fake Burst, we need some place to toss the snare. It's clearly in the same unintended interaction category as those two, and yet it slipped into the game. And that will become even more ironic when we get to Zane. But first, Amara. Now, ignoring Fake Grass, Amara has the actual Phase Grass skills, including Ties of Bind. These have short, max 7-second durations and 16 to 18 second cooldowns. If she specs into Avatar plus Restless for cooldown and prioritizes cooldown with some of her gear choices, and kills grasp enemies well before the 7-second duration ends, she can theoretically proc ASE anointments fairly often. But that's deceptive for a couple reasons. First, Phase Grasp with all of its variants is the only action skill that requires a target. This means it's the only action skill that, without Fake Grasp, cannot proc ASE anointments prior to combat. Every other action skill can do this. It may not be always practical to do so, specifically with action skills with long durations, but that's what ASA anointments are for. And it doesn't change the fact that it's the only one we can't proc prior to entering combat. We have to alert the enemy of our presence by grasping one, then kill it, or let the skill duration run its course before ASCs will proc. Second, Phase Grasp, even when properly used, will not proc ASC anointments at all if the target is grasp immune. I'm using ASC Terror here on my grenade so we can visually see when the anointment procs. The edges of the screen will go misty green from Terror. Now, I grasp Traunt here, but nothing happens, even after the max 7-second duration of Phase Grasp. I've utilized the action skill. It did its damage, but I'm not getting the anointment benefits. Okay? Even if there are non-grasp immune targets involved, it doesn't work. I grasp Traunt here with ties that bind and link to a nearby trooper. Damage done to Traunt kills the trooper via the link, but the ASC still does not proc. Same goes for the other Phase Grasp skill, Fist Over Matter, and anybody that gets killed by the Fist. Eternal Fist, oddly enough, will proc ASC anoints after the first kill. If the grasp target dies quickly enough for the sphere to seek out and grasp a new target, the ASC anoint will proc, even though technically the action skill is not yet ended. But again, the target must be graspable. Now, Gearbox might be able to fix this, address the grasp immune issue. I hope they do. But that still is the initial issue of inability to proc ASCs prior to combat with Phase Grasp. Bottom line, pre-patch, Fake Grasp was the only way Amara could proc ASC anointments consistently in a short period of time with Phase Grasp. Okay, without it, she's at a disadvantage with mobbing. And against big game bosses that can't be grasped, she can't even use them, not with Phase Grasp anyway. Yes, she can use Phase Cast and Phase Slam, and now in Phase Flare. Phase Cast and Phase Slam, however, are short duration skills with very long cooldowns. And even if you can reduce their cooldown periods to reasonable figures, they operate very differently from Phase Grasp and especially Ties That Bind. Phase Flare, in contrast, is designed as a longer duration skill, more appropriate for ASA anointments. But doesn't Amara still fare better than Zane or Mose? Mose, yes. Zane, no. Not now for sure. Okay, Zane can theoretically trigger or stagger activations of Clone and Bear to proc ASC, but that's a very difficult thing to coordinate in actual gameplay. Zane, however, had and still has Fake Toss. Remember I mentioned Flack's ability to toss his snare off a cliff and proc ASC anointments? Well, Zane can do this, the same thing with his barrier, and has been able to do so since ASC anointments were introduced. And I am puzzled as to why this mechanic was not removed, along with Fake Grasp and Fake Burst. On top of Fake Toss, however, Zane now has the Mantis Cannon, putting him on the same level as Flack with Rack Attack. He can spam ASC anointments with Abandon now. Okay. I do not understand how removing Amari's ability to do that and then giving Zane a skill that allows him to do the same balances things out. Okay. Finally, we have Mose, who can jump in and right back out of Iron Bear, although getting the cooldown short enough to get the most out of ASC anointments requires some very specific skill choices and gear, and a very specific playstyle. Iron Cub, meanwhile, is very much a long duration skill, more appropriate to ASC anointments. Mose basically is just not set up for ASC. So, from a purely ASC anointment perspective, things are clearly no more balanced among Vault Hunters than they were prior to the patch. Now, as for comparing the ability of each Vault Hunter to proc all anointments, okay, universal versus Vault Hunter specific, action skill in versus action skill start versus action skill active, I don't know how to do that. And since the devs have indicated that they are, quote, monitoring how these changes affect these characters and their builds and are looking to adjust as necessary in the future, unquote, I don't believe they figured out an easy way to do that either. Okay, the end result is a great many frustrated players and a great many builds that are no longer viable because of this one change. Now, my appearance just changed because at this point in the original video, I explained how the removal of Fake Grasp specifically affected the Terror mechanic and demonstrated its effects on one specific build, Giant Killer Amara. Now, with the end of the second annual Bloody Harvest event, the only way to generate Terror is via ASC and melee anointments. Giant Killer Amara pairs Terror ammo regen with the Sleeping Giant SMG. It depends on the ability to quickly generate and maintain maximum Terror stacks, which became extremely difficult to do with the removal of Fake Grasp. Now, a review of earlier Giant Killer footage, however, revealed that the Terror mechanic itself has changed. Terror can stack 3 times, and every Terror perk has 3 levels to match those 3 stacks. To get the maximum benefit of any Terror perk, we need to max out and maintain 3 stacks. Now, prior to the patch, or perhaps prior to the end of Bloody Harvest, a single proc of an AAC Applied Terror anointment would, as it says in the description, apply Terror once every 3 seconds. Each one of these automatic applications would, after about 6 seconds, max out Terror. You can actually see one Fake Grass max out Terror in this pre-patch clip. Since the patch, or perhaps since Bloody Harvest ended, it now takes 3 separate ASC Terror procs, each no more than about 15 seconds apart, to max out Terror. Okay, the earlier footage of Flak's Snare and Zane's Barrier and Mantis Cannon demonstrated this. This change was not, to my knowledge, communicated in any patch notes. Hopefully, it's just a bug that Gearbox will fix. I have submitted a separate ticket about this to 2K. In any case, pre-patch Giant Killer Amara could max Terror with one Fake Grass before going into combat, with subsequent Fake Grass while mobbing, keeping it maxed. Fake Grasping exclusively during bossing would also keep it up with the option to grasp adds if they became an issue. Maxing out the reload bonuses on the Sleeping Giant and then rarely ever reloading due to max Terror ammo regen produced a single target gun build that teared through mobs in a very satisfying way. It also bossed well. It didn't one-shot anybody, but properly used, it would eat away at big boss hit bars in matter-of-fact fashion. Post-patch, without Fake Grass and with the change to AAC Terror application, it can't do that. It can't generate max Terror prior to combat, and even if we manage to max out Terror in the first 3 grasp kill cycles, maintaining it is much more difficult, and it can't be used at all during bossing. We can use Phase Cast during bossing, but that's beside the point. Prior to the patch, this build could beat the Guardian takedown crystal charging sequences. It required discipline and was not easy, but it could do it consistently, much more often than not, but only with ties that bind and Fake Grass. Without Fake Grass, however, that is now impossible, and being able to boss is pointless if we can't get to the bosses. If the change to ASA Terror application is a bug and gets fixed, Giant Killer Amara might mob efficiently again, even without Fake Grass, but she still wouldn't be able to boss, not with Phase Grass. So it's a complicated issue, but I think I've made my point. If the playing field was unbalanced to begin with, it still is now, just in different ways. If we want to make ASC anointment activations fair, I'd give Amara back Fake Grass. I might also suggest giving Mose something along similar lines, except that Mose now has all these new Iron Bear active anointments. As I said, I don't know how to compare the ability of each Vault Hunter to proc all anointments, and all these new anointments further complicate that. I still maintain, though, that if the goal was to ensure that no Vault Hunter has an unfair advantage to anointments activating, this did not accomplish that goal. The only thing I know it did for sure was screw up my build, and I'd like it back, please. And that's it. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.